Okay, we'll make a start. So, this talk's going to be called Automation in Testing, and I'm going to tell you my career so far in automation, the journey and learnings that I've gone on and my current views of automation, and hopefully give you some interesting ideas of how you can use automation in your companies. I always forget to mention my name, so my name is Richard Bradshaw. I tweet and blog as The Friendly Tester. I'm a consultant contractor in the UK. I run a lot of meetups. I run a peer conference. If anyone's not familiar with a peer conference, we get together on a weekend and deep dive into some topic of testing. But there's always beer involved, so I'm always there. Post this talk, if you do want to talk to me, I'll probably be in the bar most nights until they ask me to leave. Apart from the night before the talk, where I thought 2 o'clock was a sensible time to call in. So yeah, and you can get me on Twitter and you can read them on my blog. So I want to tell you my career this far in automation. So I've never had any other job than testing. I know a lot of people always say I fell into testing. I had a placement year during my degree, and it was for a big bank, and they gave me loads of training. And then when I graduated, I tried to get a job with graduate schemes, and I keep getting rejected. So then I went for testing jobs, and I got like 4 job offers in a week. So I thought, testing's my path. But I started with a small team. There was about 4 of us, and we had very little automation, but they were obsessed with trying to do some regression testing. That was their sole focus. It was like, we're going to do automated regression testing. And I was like, I don't even know what that is. It's like, what is this? Like, we just do testing. But we were in a separate team. We didn't talk to the testers. They were over there. Developers were over there. And we were just this little team in the middle responsible for automation, apparently. And we were using a tool called QA Run. Has anyone used QA Run? No? See, I'm not even that old, and that's how old this company was, still using QA Run. It was a tool by CompuWare. It later became QTP and a few other tools. So that was my year 1. It was kind of like, hey, we're not really doing a lot. We try to, but it's really slow, and we're using old tools. In my year 2, I was working for a travel agent website. And you know when you have to pay and put your address in, and you have to keep saying, my name's Mr. Test, and I live at Testville on 123 Test Street in Test Town. And I had to book flights. I probably booked 100 flights a day, and it was painful. So I came across iMacro. Has anyone used iMacro? No, it's an awful plugin for Firefox that just allows you to repeat your actions on the forms. So I started using iMacro. I was like, I'm getting quite good at this. So I asked the team. I said, can we do some automation at this company? He was like, nope, we haven't got time for that. Need you to test. And I was like, okay. So I thought, I'm going to ignore them, and in my own time, I'm going to learn some tools. And I got introduced to Selenium. This was Selenium RC at the time. I started learning Selenium in my own time. Now, year 3 was at the same company, and a new person came in, and he demanded that we had automation. Testing was no longer needed. We don't need you to do manual testing anymore. I want you just to do automation. And we're all like, we don't know how. And I was like, I do. I've been spending my evenings and weekends learning Selenium. I can do this. So he was like, cool, off you go. And if anyone's tried to just learn something in the weekend and actually apply it in the real field, I failed immediately. I had no idea what I was doing. I didn't have very little basic programming skills, and I was really, really struggling. But I carried on, and I persisted, and I became pretty good in WebDriver. And I was automating tests every day. There was hundreds of the things, thousands of them. I was surrounded by automated tests. And I thought, I'm doing pretty good at this. We've got all this automated testing now. We're going to be quicker. We're going to be faster. So year 5, I was the guy. I was strolling through the company going, I can automate that, and I can automate this. And I was really proud of myself. The Wild West theme here, I was the guy with the silver bullet gun. I was like, I can go into any organization, and I can make you guys awesome. I can automate everything you need automating. It's like, just give me a pile of scripts, and I'll automate them for you. And sadly, that's exactly what happened. I joined a company. They put me in the dark corner over here. Can't talk to anyone. Here's a big pile of test scripts. Automate them. And I was like, oh, okay. So I sat in the corner, and it was like, Richard, you okay? And I was like, yeah, don't talk to me. I'm busy. And I didn't speak to anyone for about 6 months, just automating through this big pile of test scripts. And by the time I got to year 6, I had automated far too many things. I was spending all my time fixing failing automation. I didn't talk to anyone. I didn't understand the product because I was just following scripts. I had no idea what the goal of the business was. I was literally just writing automation every day. And 4 years ago, I discovered there was actually a testing community. People actually went to conferences to talk about testing. I also later discovered that I was 2 streets away from a Eurostar conference in Manchester. No idea. None of my team knew. None of my company knew. We didn't even know people got together like this. But anyway, I discovered the community, and I did rapid software testing. I did it with James Back, and it was quite an interesting learning experience. And he was talking about automation being tools that help us do our testing. And I was like, okay, but that's not my experience. People want me to try and automate people's jobs away. That's what they wanted me to do. It was like, well, you know, they're just sitting there running test scripts, you can replace them. And I was like, oh, it sounds rather boring. And I wasn't really enjoying it. I was just, like I said, I was sat in the corner, really boring. But then I learned about the tools to do it. And then year 7, we're talking 2 years ago now, I got introduced to testing and checking. We're going to look at that in a little bit. And in the last year, last 2 years, I've started talking about automation in testing. So you're probably wondering why I'm talking about automation in testing. But I had a shift, and I don't know if any of you have had this shift yet. When I was doing all this automation, I suddenly became, I knew what I could do was very different to what I was telling the computer to do, but I couldn't talk about it. You know, I was going, well, we've got all these tests, and you're going to automate the tests. I was like, yeah, I've automated the tests. And it's like, well, why aren't they finding any issues? I was like, I don't know. I have no idea. I've automated what you asked me to do. But I knew there was something different between what I can do and what the computer can do. So I had a paradigm shift, as some people like to say. I basically read testing and checking. And now it made perfect sense to me that there was a difference. It made perfect sense that when I'm testing, I've got a brain, and I was able to see things all over the screens. I was able to observe all that was going on the page. I was able to think in real time and create new ideas and new tests. Whereas my automation was essentially dumb. It was just had to be educated by me. So the things that the computer was doing weren't the same as what I can do. So these are just some definitions. I'm not going to read them out to you, but they're taken from rapid software testing. And it's basically the idea that a testing is a performance. It's something that you do. It's like it's real time, and you're learning, and you're gathering information, and you're using that to design your next test, and you're learning new information. And then they talk about checks. Now, they talk about checks as being an algorithm, and that makes perfect sense to me. If you think about what you try and do when you automate a test, you're essentially trying to codify a step and an assertion, but you're only ever going to be able to do a few. So we call it checking, and a check is obviously an instance of checking. So one thing to observe is that testers are terrible at checking. The computers are really good at it. Testers are terrible at checking because if I wrote some automation that was meant to check this text on a website, but there was a big red box on the top of the page, a tester would notice, but the computer wouldn't notice unless you told it to check for a big red box on the page. But you're never going to do that, because when you're designing automation, you've got a set goal that you're trying to do in your head. So that's why checking can only observe what you tell it to observe. But one key thing I want to say is I don't want you to go away and start using testing and checking. It's up to you guys. Read the materials and actually see if you think that there's a difference between what the computer and what the human can do. I think there is, and I think this gives us a way to talk about it. And yeah, so it allowed me to actually then go and talk to people about the differences. It gave me terminology to talk about the differences. So I thought, wow, I've gone so far now. Like, why? When I started using the term test automation in companies, I started getting confused, and they were confused what I was talking about. I was like, oh, so you want to automate tests? And I was like, no, I'm automating checks. I was like, oh, what's a check? Oh, okay, I'll educate you. And then we started talking about checks. But then I looked at all the definitions for test automation, and everyone still uses the term test automation, and that may be okay. But you know, we have some of the ones here, the Wikipedia ones, obviously, which Wikipedia, so no doubt it's the brilliant. You know, this is one everyone should use because it's Wikipedia. Then the ISTQB, you know, we've got things here. I agree with some of this, but the bit about performing test execution, and I don't really Agree with that. And then there's the one from RST, which is just any use of software or hardware to support testing, which is the kind of one I prefer. But I was still having problems with people talking about test automation. So I'm not going to ask you all, but I'd like you to all think, how does your company talk about test automation? What does it mean to your team? What do they expect when you say, I'm going to do some test automation? And also, when was the last time any of you actually sat down and decided what test automation was? When was the last time you went, this is what I think test automation is? What do you think it is? Most people just blindly go ahead and think it's, automating tests. So I would encourage you to do this, just to see if you're all actually on the same page. That's why I did it. Obviously, I'm going to ask you to do it. I've done it. So the first thing I think test automation is inaccurate. It's not an accurate term for what it is we're actually trying to do. If you're trying to automate a testing, then obviously my terminology now would be that we're trying to automate a check. And if you start talking about automated testing, it gets very confusing between what you're doing and what the computer's doing, and then telling people who aren't in our testing circle what the difference is. So it becomes quite tricky. So I think it's not accurate on what we try and do. I think it gives us tunnel vision in that we're always solely trying to go, I need to automate tests. Here's a big pile of tests. I need to automate them. And I think we miss some of the other ideas for test automation because of that. And more importantly now, I think the term is tarnished in our industry because of the reasons I've just tried to explain. But I think when I go into some other companies now, they're solely obsessed with test automation being automated testing. I want to stop you having to do all these automated testing. I want you to have stopped doing all these manual test scripts or all these manual checks, and I want to automate it. And that's all they ever think about. And most people, I believe now, will talk about automated checking. And there's nothing wrong with automated checking. It's a very, very useful tool. And I think we have to do it in certain contexts these days. But if you're in your company and you're just automating test after test after test, I would say read up this to see what you're doing and see maybe if you can get a better perspective on what it is you're working on. So I want to talk about automation in testing. It's just words, so I'm not trying to set the world alight with some new catchy phrase or anything like that. They're just words. But I now started to want to talk about how we use automation in testing. How do we what other ways can we use automation? So I think it gives us opportunities now, because I'm going to give you some in the past in the next few slides, but I've built loads of tools that just help me test as a human. I've built endless list of tools. And I think test automation blinds some people to doing that. Education, it's given me the terminology now to go and talk to management, other testers, and try and explain to them what automation can and cannot do. And I think it's inclusive. Who's worked in a team where you have some teams, 4 people or so, that are their sole job is to just do automation. And then you have the testers over here whose sole job is just to test. We need to bring those two people together, and I think obviously Agile and other things are now bringing these people together. But I still speak to people in the UK who have these separate teams, and to me that's madness. It's crazy. We can't work that way. And the main message as well is it needs to support testing. So if you think about automation, for me, I call automated checks change detection. I think Ken Kaner was the original one to say something along those lines. But an automated check would just tell you that something's changed. It doesn't tell you there's a bug. It doesn't tell you there's a problem. It just says it used to be like this, but now it's like this. And now you need to go in and use your brain to go, is there actually a problem here? But the main focus is always testing, and the problem we're always trying to solve is testing. It's not that we need to automate. It's we're trying to solve the testing problem. It's why we all have jobs, and we're moving so fast these days that we need to make tools that support our testing efforts, because you need to get this information quicker and quicker and quicker. I think some of the crazy companies like Etsy now were releasing 800 times a day or something ridiculous. But this is going to hopefully maybe happen to more and more companies. So I want to tell you some stories of things that I've built, which I believe don't fall in a test automation space. So monitoring. I worked at a company where a big supermarket wanted us to build a website for them. And they wanted us to have some monitoring. They were like, we're going to give you £10,000 a year to have some monitoring for us. So we automated the APIs, and if they fail, we'd get an alert. And it was nice and easy. And then, oh no, we want you to automate some user journeys. And I was like, oh, okay. So I went to the tool that we're using. I said, can I automate user journeys? And they're like, oh, our tool's awesome. You can do anything on our tool. I was like, oh, great, thank you. So they sent me a video of how to do it. And I went on the tool, and it was a drag and drop. It was basically like a GUI iterating test automation. It was like, I want to go to this URL, I want to click this button, I want to do that. And as I was doing that, I started getting really suspicious. I was like, I think this is just WebDriver. I think underneath the hood, this is just WebDriver. So I started digging into their tool, and it was WebDriver. They built a commercial tool on top of WebDriver. So I went, I can do that. I don't need to use your tool. So it turns out that the user journeys on their tool were $80 per journey per month. And the vendor wanted 10. So do the math, it's about $10,000 a year. And I built my own. I'd already written loads of WebDriver code. So I built my own monitoring using WebDriver. I stuck it in the cloud, put it on Jenkins, and it used to run every hour, and it would email us when there was a problem. A bit of advice if you do that, though. Don't put it in the same data center as your production, because if your data center goes down, you ain't going to be told anything. And I did that, and I learned the hard way. So deployment's a massive business now, you know, the whole DevOps movement. But there's nothing stopping testers who have been writing automation for a while getting involved with that space. You've all probably got more programming skills than the people who have been writing automation. Let's say WebDriver or some other GUI tool. You've probably got more programming skills than you give yourself credit for. And you can probably easily go and pick up something like the DevOps, things like Ansible and Chef and Docker and these kind of things. Log files. Whose system has log files, and do you read them? Our system has loads of log files. But they're massive, you know, and you're just scrolling through this log file trying to find an exception somewhere, and it's just really time-consuming. So we wrote little apps that parsed the log files for us. It would just tell us how many exceptions are in there and what line they were on, and we can quickly get to them. We wrote a tool, I think he's here, a guy called Mike. He wanted a tool where he wanted to monitor the log file in real time and then play a beep in his ear when there was an exception. So we helped him write a tool. He just tailed it in the command line, and it would play a beep when there was an exception. But it was great for him, because as he's testing, on the UI, there might be nothing wrong at all. You might not see anything. But underneath, the system's crying. It's like, oh, I'm failing, and you can't see me. So that's an example of automation. It's a great tool. The step 2 one is a tool I built. I was working at a place where we had 10 steps in a form. And obviously, you know, it's really boring. Like the changes are on steps 8, 9, and 10, and then we had to obviously go through steps 1 to 8 just to start doing some testing. So I thought, I've automated all this in WebDriver already. So I built a UI. I said, I want to go to this state. I want it 50 times. Go, and it would fire up 50 browsers, navigate me to step 8, and then stop. But now I've got 50 browsers at step 8 ready for me to test, and it saves me hours of time. Great example of automation. Data management. Most people who automate or have automated checks have probably got some code that does your data management for you. You've probably got some code that creates a user or creates a profile or creates some kind of objects in your system. Share it. That's one of the key things I learned recently, well, a few years ago, was we'd written all this code, and I walked past a tester one day, and she was in SQL creating data. And I was like, well, firstly, that's dangerous. You know, if you make a mistake, you can bring down the test environment. And I said, we've also written loads of code to do this already. Our automated suite has the ability to create every type of data you need. So again, we wrapped it in a GUI. And we said, hey, use this now. Click user, put some data in, click go, and let the tool send the commands. And the Skype bot. We never really finalized this, but basically the idea was, and we got really, really close. The idea was to have a Skype bot that would create data. So I had a product owner, we give them a new version, and he would then message me going, I need a user. I was like, okay, I'll get you a user. Oh, I need a profile. Okay, I need an offer. I was like, okay. So I'm creating all this data for him, and it's just slowing me down, it's interrupting me. But he's the product owner, so I'm like, okay, I'll stop what I'm doing and I'll help you. So we had the idea of why don't we hook our data management into Skype? So then he can go to Skype and go, Skype bot, create me a user. And it would call our APIs, which in turn would create data. And we got really close, and it did work, but it didn't really take off. But now we're currently doing it again with Slack. You know, Slack's like the cool tool these days, isn't it? You know, if you haven't got Slack, you're not doing Agile anymore. So now I'm trying to do it with Slack. But it's the same principle, you know. Message Slack bot, ask it to create some data. If you've got non-technical people in your team and they need to use your system, take it away, make it easy for them. Use the automation you already have. And I said virtual machines and Docker, they're becoming a big thing, and if there's nothing stopping testers from getting involved in these spaces and learning these tools and helping automate the things that need to be automated. And then app deployment. I'm recently been working on mobile for the last 14, 16 months. And installing the app and all the test devices is really boring. It's like Google Drive, download APK, click on APK, open APK, install APK. It's like, come on, it's really boring. So about 3 weeks ago, I started playing around with Appium. We tried to use Appium to do some mobile automation. That's probably for a separate talk, but I think the mobile tools are really immature at the moment, and I think the mobile platforms themselves are really immature. So that space is a hard one to master. But I've been using Appium the last few weeks I plug all my Android devices in, and I wrote an Appium script that installs the app, opens the app, logs in, and then stops. Similar to the step 2 thing. So now I can deploy my app to loads of devices, log me in, and then I can carry on testing. It's actually saving me about an hour a day, because we go through many versions in a day. That, to me, is gold automation. That's helping me test. It's not trying to do what I do, it's trying to help me, it's trying to push me along to extend what I can do. So these are just some tools, examples that I've built, things that I've done, but there's nothing stopping you guys from building these kind of tools. And we need to stop building tools like this. Who's got a build radiator in their company? And it's like just in the corner somewhere on the wall, and it's just like, look at me, I'm failing. And you stop what you're doing, and then you go and look at why the CI is failing. We need to stop building, we need to build less of that kind of automation. As I said, just automated checks and are really important, and build pipelines, but we need to be building tools that allow us to carry on, not demanding our attention. Most people, as soon as a red build happens, it's like panic through the whole company. There's people running around going, the build's failed, help us. And it's like, calm down. Calm down, we'll get it green again. So yeah, we need to build less of this thing that's just trying to constantly get at us all the time. We need to build tools, as I said, that support the testing efforts that you're doing day to day. And to highlight what you want to do, you need to analyze what it is you're doing every day and which bit's boring you, or which bit when you start testing do you go, oh, I've got to do this bit again. And then once you've done it, you go, I can test now, I'm happy again. We need to highlight those things that are really depressing to do, or really boring, or really mono. So again, we need to support the testing efforts. You need to be working close with your other testers if your job is to just be the automator. But also, if you're a tester, you need to highlight which bits should we automate, which bits shouldn't we automate. It's not trying to automate the whole thing that you do, because it's slow. It's going to slow you down. We need to build a little bit of it. So who's got a company where? So I've done this. So I've probably been sat here for 3 days, and then suddenly I'll be like, woohoo! Walking through the office, and why are you so happy? I was like, I've just managed to get the app to scroll up and down. And it's like, how long did it take you? 3 days. Only 3 days. I'm awesome. And they're like, oh yeah, you're really good. And I was like, yeah, I know. It's really impressive, isn't it? And then I thought about it the other day, it takes me about 5 seconds to scroll on my mobile phone. Like, when am I going to get any value from all that effort? But I've done that throughout my career. I bet all you guys have. You get sucked into this tiny problem that you can do yourself really quickly. So in the example I had, we had a list of offers, and I just wanted to get to the one at the bottom. And it was torture. iOS just refused to scroll. So in the end, I spent ages trying to make it scroll, when I could have just made the automation get me as far as there, quickly scroll myself and let it carry on. Or I could have just made the data so that the data was always at the top and I didn't need to scroll. But I was obsessed with trying to make it scroll. I had to succeed. That's a waste of time. It's a waste of value. It's a waste of your effort. And plus, 3 days where I actually wasn't collecting any new information about the product. But that's why we test. We test to get new information about the product. But I've spent 3 days trying to make a tool scroll on an app. But I know everyone else who does it. I was at Eurostar last week, and I was talking to Alan Richardson, and he says we need to focus on these words. So we need to think about what should we automate, and what has been automated, because I've worked at a lot of places, and probably other people have, where you just go, well, if the automated check's passing, then why just keep it there? You don't need to remove it. Just keep adding. Just keep building this huge list of checks because they're all green. But the problem is, they end up not checking things that are relevant anymore. If you've had a script that was written a year ago, is it actually checking things that are useful now? If you keep adding, the problem is it will take longer to run. So we did this once. We had about 500, we had about 400, I think, automated checks, and they were starting to take about 4 hours to run, which is too slow. So how can we solve it? So again, we spent about a week trying to paralyze our execution so that it would run quicker. And fair enough, we got it down to about half an hour, which is great. But then when we actually went through the list of things that we'd written, half of them were nonsense. Half of them were duplicated by another scenario. So we really need to actually continuously review the things that we've automated and decide if we really need it anymore. Instead of just building up this big pile. Just because they're green doesn't mean it's giving you any value information. And then again, what we should automate, again, it's the same message. If you're doing a process, if you're doing some testing and you keep repeating the same thing, perhaps that's a key candidate to automate. I automated all my notes collection. So at the end of a testing session, it will go and find my Evernote instance, it will go and find all the screenshots that I took, and it will go and find the log files from the system, and it will bundle them up into a zip file and put them on a shared drive. I automated that because it saves me loads of time. And as I said, I'm the human, and I need to be testing to collect valuable information about this product. So as we said, these are just trying to summarize what's going on. We really need to put the focus on our testing skills. The problem, testing is a really complex space. It's really complex things to do. Software development's a really complex space. And when we try and automate that into an automated check or an automated test, you're basically trying to educate a system. You're trying to educate a computer. The computer doesn't know anything. And you're trying to give it all the skills you have in your head and put it into code. That's incredibly difficult to do. And it takes time. And we're moving, my environment and other environments I've been in, we're moving so fast these days that I can't sit in the corner for 6 months writing automated checks. There just simply isn't enough hours in the day, there isn't enough time, and it doesn't return me any value. And also, it's really hard to automate the testing skills that you have. As I said, the ability to observe. You can look at a page almost instantly know that there's a problem, whereas the computer can't unless you've told it all the infinite ways that there could be a problem. And that's incredibly hard to do. But you could create a tool that just goes, this might be a problem, this might be a problem, and then you can go, nah, that's not a problem, and carry on. The testing and checking bit, as I said, I like the definitions. You can get the definitions, just Google for it. But for me, the key message in this whole, there's endless debates about this on Twitter and everywhere else, and it can be really tedious and boring. But for me, the distinction is just acknowledging that you can do things and the computer can do things. Just acknowledge the fact that there is a difference. And it's not, I've had a boss who said, and this is awful, but I had a boss who said, we don't need that person anymore, automate their job. And I was like, I don't think you quite know how this works. Let me try and explain to you what's actually going on when you do this automation. But I still think it happens. And I still think people think you can automate what you're doing to save time. Regression's one of these big minefields that people think is a great subject to automate. But with the risk of regression is probably something brand new happening that you had no idea would happen. Your automation isn't going to know about that. It's only going to know about the things you told it to look at. So it's probably likely just going to point you in a direction to say this is broken, but you then take over as a human and go, oh, okay, I found out why it's broken, but it's not important. Or, your system moves and changes over time, but then you've got to keep your automation moving over time. You've got to keep them both up to date. And again, as I said, it's really time consuming. So we really need to find ways that we can test quicker and build tools that help us. Who knows Jerry Weinberg? Yeah, most people, everyone likes Jerry Weinberg. I did one of his training classes earlier this year, and one of his key messages he kept saying, he must have said it about, 50 times in the week. It just doesn't have to be this way. And I think it's great, because the years I've had in automation, for the first 5, as I said, I was just following the flow of everyone else. But now, it doesn't have to be this way. You can change it. You can do different things. You can build different tools. You can educate people. You can actually change the way we're using automation. So, again, I've mentioned it, but we need to remember that The computers themselves are dumb. I stole this from Dorothy Graham. She's written a few awesome things about automation. The computer is dumb. It does not know anything at all. You have to tell it. You have to educate the computer. And that's essentially what automated checking is. You have to go, this is how you do, you have to say, this is how you click on the page, this is how you load the page, this is how you click a button, this is how you type here, this is how you check this text. And it's so boring. It's really, really boring. But that's what we're all obsessed with doing, and there is some value in it. But as I said, the message is that it's going to, even when you do educate it, it's going to become dumb again in probably a few days or a week, depending how fast you're moving. And then you have to go and make it smart again. And yeah, it's really hard. So just remember that automation is dumb. You're the smart people, not the tool. And I think there's going to be a change in the next, well, it's already happening, but I think it's going to happen even more. As testers who know how to write automation, or as the developer who writes automation, there is hundreds and hundreds of tools these days. There's like a new one every week. It's like we've entered the JavaScript world. You know, there's a new library every week. It's like, oh, what, you're using React? Oh, God, that's a month old. Don't use that anymore. There's a new shiny one out, and you're like, oh, great, amazing. But that's the kind of space that we're going to be in, I think, in the next now and coming soon. You know, a lot of people are obsessed with, doing things through the UI and writing UI automation. But as I said, things are shifting and moving faster. There's ways, you do stuff in JavaScript level these days, do things at the API, do it at the DB, and you need a load of tools to be able to do that. So I think we need to start learning more tools. We need to take advantage of some of the tools and not be shy to just go and explore and try different things. And that's coming from a guy who sells WebDriver training. So, there is so many other tools out there that we need to take advantage of. And now I think it's about, I've always been hired in the past because, Java and WebDriver. So yeah, you're perfect for us. But now I think we all need to go around and go, what's in my toolbox? And not just automation tools. What other skills are in our toolbox? As a tester, we need to be creating this big toolbox now, which is full of endless tools that you could possibly have, things that you could build, and just keep building it. And as I said, I'm going to repeat it again because I think it's really important. Who writes automation in the room? I should probably have asked you at the start. Whose job is it to write automation? You probably have really decent programming skills. But there's one important thing that I think is missing when people talk about programming. There's lots of literature about programming and coding and the difference. And they mention how coding is just the actual bit of typing on the keyboard. Really, really boring. It's just the typing on the keyboard bit. The programming bit's where the skill's involved. It's where you design it in your head. It's where you think about it. It's where you go, how am I going to do this? How am I going to do that? And even if you don't know how to write certain code these days, you can probably know what it is you want to do. And who's used Google? Yeah, Google's a programmer's best friend. It's like, I don't know what to do, but I know what I want to do. So you just Google it, and someone will give you a block of code, and you go, copy, paste. Job done, move on. Until it fails, and then you go, I have no idea what this code does. Who wrote this code? Where did it come from? And nobody knows. But again, we probably have more programming language than we give ourselves credit for. And I think if you know what to look for, you can probably build any tool that you want to build. And more importantly as well, it's quite funny in the last few years, we're actually talking to developers a bit more now. They're not the scary person on the other side of the room. James Back says, knowing a good developer is like having a friend with a pickup truck. Or in the UK, it's like having a friend with a van. When you want to move a sofa or you want to move your fridge, there's always someone you probably know who's going to help you. Or you're going to pay a really expensive contractor or company to bring you a van. But if you've got ideas of things you want to build, go and talk to your developers. Go and ask them to build stuff for you. There was a job title that came out a few years ago, the software developer in test. And I always thought that role was someone who was like a developer just for the testing team, just for me, just to help me do what I want to do. But it turns out their job is just to write automated checks in the corner. And it's like, no, if you are a software developer in test, or you are a developer for the testing team, the testers are your product owner. They're the people who you should be building tools for. So if you've got that role, you should be, again, if you're a one-man band, as Hybe referenced earlier, you should be thinking, what can I build that helps me? And if you can't build it, get a developer to build it for you. I find things like beer works or cake. So most developers like cake or biscuits. And, just go and ask them to do it. We had one where I came over with a problem. He told me to go away. I came back in 10 minutes and he'd finished it. He'd done the whole thing. And I said, how did it work? And he goes, magic. I was like, oh, fair enough. Sounds good. I need to get me some of that magic. But that's all he did. He just said, go away, build it, and he built it for me. It was great. So this is really long and boring. But I tried to summarize what I think we need to do. So I'll read out. The way we talk and think about automation needs to change. We need to remember that it's the testing problem that we're trying to solve, not the we need automation problem. And you need to use tools accordingly, but acknowledge their limits. Not every tool is perfect. None of these tools are perfect. Your context is going to continuously change, as Hybe and Alex tried to mention earlier. And you're going to need custom tools. You're going to have to build frameworks. You're going to have to take pieces from here and there. But acknowledge its limits. If you do find yourself having gone 3 or 4 hours trying to automate something, take a step back and go, is this worth carrying on with? Don't just plow on because you'll waste time and value. I got told to include this, so it's nothing to do with automation at all. But maybe rate the session online if you enjoyed the session. Even if you didn't enjoy it, rate it, but I will find you. I'm here all week, so I will find you. And thanks for listening. Has anyone got any questions? No? Excellent. Move on. No. Does anyone have any questions? We'll see if there is any questions. I actually can't see you, so if there is any. I don't think there is any. That means it was either brilliant or terrible. It's like nowhere in the middle. Okay, well, if there's no questions, then we're done. Everyone wants food, I guess. Thank you for coming.